And we're back for episode 3.6. Our episode begins with Sam and Gilly on the run after the mutiny at Craster's Keep. As in the book, Gilly is better at building fires than Sam, and Sam sings a song about the faith of the Seven. In the book, Gilly thinks Sam is a pretty good singer, but Sam mentions that his black brother Darian is much better. And in the book, this singer Darian actually accompanies Sam and Gilly on their adventure south to Old Town. Meanwhile, south of the wall, we have this extra scene of hostility between Osha and Mira. In the book, Osha and Mira don't really have a problem with each other, and again, Osha has gone off at this point with Rickon. Now the show has added a very interesting scene equating visions and seizures. The book is much more subtle about the connection between telepathic abilities and seizures, but that connection is still there. Specifically, when Bran first takes control of Hodor in the book, Hodor acts like he's had a seizure. Additionally, there's a character in the book named Varamir Sixskins, who tries to warg into a person, and she has a seizure. Of course, in this scene, this is just a vision, presumably sent telepathically by the Three-Eyed Crow. But the connection between telepathy and seizures is nonetheless there. I bring all of this up because Sweet Robin in the Vale also suffers from seizures. And I believe it's linked to the fact that he has a weirwood throne that has inside it the souls of the Children of the Forest. I believe his seizures are caused by them trying to seize his body, or at minimum, trying to communicate with him. Here in the show, Jojen has a vision of Jon Snow north of the wall, surrounded by enemies. In the book, Jojen has no such vision. This transitions to an extra scene of Jon preparing to climb the wall, and Ygritte going on and on about his oral sex abilities. Here, Ygritte tells Jon that Tormund has climbed the wall 100 times. In the book, the 50-time feat is Mance's. But one must ask, why climb the wall 50 times? Raiding? Doesn't seem worth it. And why not send an underling? It may be that Mance was performing some sort of diplomacy south of the wall. Mance may have southern allies. Now here Ygritte tells Jon that she knows he's a double agent, but that he will remain loyal to her now that they're an item. In the book, we don't have any evidence that Ygritte has figured this out, but it should be noted that according to Wildling custom, Ygritte and Jon are married, as he kidnapped her. Kidnapping is a reoccurring theme in our story, and a big part of the legend of Bael the Bard, who kidnapped the daughter of the Lord of Winterfell. It should be noted that other characters like Peter Baelish kidnapped the daughter of Winterfell, Sansa, and Rhaegar kidnapped the daughter of Winterfell, Lyanna. Next we have an extra scene where Anguy is teaching Arya how to shoot, when all of a sudden, we go way off book. Somehow, Melisandre has found the Brotherhood without banners. Interestingly, Melisandre greets Thoros with a Valar Morghulis, and he responds with a Valar Dohaeris. It's the greeting of the many-faced god, which is a bold choice for the show. In the book, there is one odd scene where Jaqen H'ghar says that the Red God is owed 3 lives, rather than the Many-Faced God, but other than that, we have no real reason to believe that the followers of the Red God are linked with the Many-Faced God. In fact, in the book, Melisandre clearly thinks that the forces of death are her enemy. This is not to say that both religions couldn't support the same leader, but it's pretty clear that their doctrines are different. So next we get an extra scene of Melisandre meeting Beric Dondarrion and being amazed at his resurrection. The Brotherhood without banners then decides to hand over Gendry. Now in the book, Gendry is still with the Brotherhood, but there is another of Robert's bastards named Edric Storm. Edric was being raised at Storm's End by Courtney Penrose, who purposely didn't want to yield to Stannis because he wanted to protect the boy. Penrose, though, was either betrayed by his men or killed through sorcery. Either way, Stannis took control of the castle and gained control of his bastard nephew, Edric. The show clearly thought there were too many characters and decided to merge Gendry and Edric. Meanwhile at the wall, Jon is busy climbing it. As it turns out in the book, Jon never climbs the wall like this. He waits for experienced climbers to get to the top, and they lower ropes for him. And next we get an extra scene of Ramsay torturing Theon. Here Ramsay gloats about how now he knows the Stark boys are alive. Of course in the book it was Ramsay who helped kill the Miller's boys, so he already knew this information. Here Ramsay wants Theon to guess where they are, and Theon makes 3 bad guesses: Deepwood Motte, The Last Hearth, and Carhold. One really important thing about Theon is that Theon was Ned Stark's ward, and he accompanied Ned to every castle in the north at some point. He actually knows them all, and here in the show Theon is strapped to the sigil of the Boltons. He should really know that he's at the Dreadfort. Next we have a very similar scene to the book, where the Freys demand that Edmure marry Rosalind Frey for the Freys' continued support. Oddly, here in the show the Freys also ask for Harrenhal. Robb weirdly agrees and gives Harrenhal over because it's not in the north, but of course Robb is actually the king of the north and Riverlands. Harrenhal actually belongs to House Went, which is Edmure and Catelyn's mother's house. Lady Went is missing, but if she's dead, the lands should pass to either Edmure, Catelyn, or Lysa. It's simply amazing how much show Robb is screwing over House Tully here. Now as in the book, Edmure is reluctant but eventually agrees. And once again in the show, Blackfish acts rather insubordinate to his liege lord. which is rather hypocritical considering he turned down 3 marriages. Next we have Jaime, Brienne, and Roose having dinner. Here in the show, Roose again seems to show hostility towards Jaime and even threatens to send him back to Robb Stark. But in the end, Roose wants to send Jaime to King's Landing because he fears offending the Lannisters. Now this dinner scene in the book is pretty rich and reveals all sorts of things about Roose Bolton's actions and intentions. In the book we find out Roose married Fat Walda Frey at the Twins, which was way back in Season 1, Book 1, when Robb made his crossing. That action showed that Roose was an early schemer. He may have even been planning on betraying Robb from the very beginning. At minimum, he was keeping his options open. At this point in the book, Roose has sent off most of his northern forces east to get slaughtered at Duskendale. So this means while having dinner with Jaime, he absolutely knows that he's going to betray Robb. But if Roose was trying to keep his options open the whole time, it's a huge mystery why Jaime lost his hand. Here in the show, it's played off as incompetence by Roose's crony Locke. In the book, Roose has a several-page-long convoluted explanation of why he thinks the brave companions cut off Jaime's hand. It essentially comes down to them trying to alienate Roose from the Lannisters and hoping Stannis wins at the Blackwater. Of course, that explanation makes no sense. If Stannis won at the Blackwater, Roose wouldn't have joined the Lannisters. So cutting off Jaime's hand is just irrelevant to everything. So why did Jaime get his hand cut off? Well, I think the brave companions served the Dornish, and it was revenge. Now here we find out that Brienne is staying put at Harrenhal. In the show, it's because Roose wants to punish treason, which is odd unless show Roose hasn't decided to betray Robb yet. But if he hasn't decided on betraying Robb yet, why is he letting Jaime go? It doesn't make much sense. In the book, Brienne stays behind because she's getting ransomed. Next we get an extra scene between Tywin and the Queen of Thorns, where Tywin proposes a marriage between Cersei and Loras. The QOT refuses because Cersei is too old, so Tywin threatens to make Loras a Kingsguard, and so she agrees. In the book, the Tyrells do refuse a match between Cersei and Willis because she's too old, but that's essentially the end of it. Additionally, in the book, Loras is one of the Kingsguard at this point. The Tyrells wanted that to keep Margaery well protected. Meanwhile, back at the Wall, we have this extra scene where Jon and company are having trouble. Again, in the book, Jon isn't the one climbing the wall, but he does observe others fall when a big sheet of ice falls off. Of course, the big question to ask here is how does the wall keep its shape? Ice should sublimate and break down over time due to weather, yet the wall seems to have kept its shape for thousands of years. There seems to be some sort of either technological or magical core keeping the whole wall together. Next we get this quick shot of a rose, which seems to be a shout out to a vision that Dany has in the book of a rose growing out of the wall. This is all part of an extra scene where Sansa is trying to connect with Loras. They don't really get along, but at least getting married allows them to leave King's Landing. And this leads to an extra scene where Tyrion and Cersei continue to bitch about their upcoming weddings. Again, in the book, Tyrion isn't all that upset about it, and Cersei gets off the hook when she gets denied. However, here in the show, one would think that Loras would be a good choice for Cersei, as he would rarely, if ever, want to have sex with her. Anyway, here Tyrion confronts Cersei about whether she hired Sir Mandon Moore to kill him. She denies it, which makes both of them assume it was actually Joffrey. In truth, the culprit was probably Littlefinger. Again, Mandon Moore was placed on the Kingsguard by Lysa. Next we get an extra scene where Tyrion wants to break the news to Sansa about their upcoming marriage. In the book, it's actually Cersei that breaks the news to Sansa. Sansa at first panics and tries to run, and then is brought back kicking and screaming. Sansa fairly quickly becomes resigned to her fate, and she and Tyrion are married almost immediately. Next we get an extra scene where Varys and Littlefinger confront each other over their scheming. It begins with Littlefinger commenting that the Iron Throne doesn't really have 1,000 swords, but only a few hundred. In the book, the Iron Throne is actually much bigger and requires one to climb a flight of stairs. It probably does have 1,000 swords. Anyway, here in the show, Varys wanted the Tyrells to marry Sansa simply because Littlefinger wanted her, and Littlefinger spoiled those plans, but he still doesn't have Sansa for himself. In the book, the Tyrells wanted Sansa all on their own, but yes, Littlefinger did stop their plans by catching wind of the scheme through Dantos and informing the Lannisters. Littlefinger lets Varys know that he's handed the extra character of Raz over to Joffrey to be killed. And we get this extra scene of Sansa watching Littlefinger's ship leave port and being very upset that she passed up his offer to help her escape. And finally we have Jon and Ygritte getting to the top of the wall. Now interestingly, Orell is still alive and is bringing his eagle along for his trip beyond the wall. In the book, Orell's eagle is taken over by the wildling telepath Varamir Sixskins, and his eagle later inexplicably explodes into flames when the wildlings attack the wall. Some people think that Melisandre made it explode, and she certainly does take credit for it, but Mel has never before or since displayed the ability to make beings spontaneously combust. However, in the book, the wall does seem to block telepathic messages, Jon can't reach Ghost when he crosses the wall. So I surmise the eagle exploded because it was being warged and was trying to cross the barrier of the wall. Now here, Ygritte and Jon are happy to be on top of the wall to observe the beauty around them. In the book, being on top of the wall is actually a moment of sadness for Ygritte. She weeps as she is reminded what a horrible thing the wall is, and laments that Mance Rayder never found a magical horn to bring the whole thing down. And that's all for episode 3.6. See you in episode 3.7.